Former Minnesota governor and former wrestler Jesse Ventura went on a tirade on Twitter against both Democrats and Republicans, and also committed to voting for the Green Party. So I want to go through his tweets here. And as I've done so far on this show, I like to present what I think are largely valid arguments for voting whatever which way. I think there is a valid argument to vote for Biden, or I should say to vote against Trump. I don't think there's any real valid argument to voting for Biden when he's not offering anything. But I think there's a valid argument to vote against Trump to get Trump out. I think there's a valid argument to leave the top of the ticket blank as a protest. I think that there's a valid argument to voting for third party. Now, this is one where I'm a little more indifferent to, because when it comes to the top of the ticket, it's either going to be Trump or Biden as the president. The country right now is not set up for a completely different mindset when it comes to voting in November. People, like, if there was some actual groundwork in play and the ability for a third-party candidate to actually win the election, then I would say, okay, yeah, it makes sense. But in terms of the mentality that Americans have, by and large, I'm not talking about people on Twitter. I'm talking about the majority of voters. Right now, the mentality is either they support Trump or they want to get Trump out. There is no middle ground there right now. Now, as I'm going to show you, I understand Jesse Ventura's argument, and I think it is his intention to change people's minds and think the way that he thinks. So he's going to stand strong in his views and present them the way he presents them. But unfortunately, he doesn't have control of the media. He doesn't have the power to change how voters feel about November. He may have the power to change a few people, thousands of people maybe, but by and large, he's not going to change the majority of voters that come out, who also, by the way, largely, we're talking about voters. Most voters are over 45. They get most of their information from cable news, if they even watch that, word of mouth, otherwise. So the idea that a few people on Twitter are going to be able to move mountains to get people to vote for a third-party candidate and actually have a third party win and become president, it's just not realistic. But with that said, I do want to present his argument. And I also think, look, I'm not shaming anybody here. Vote however you want to vote. I will say, though, it would be very hard for me to not shame you if you're voting for Trump. But that said, I'm not going to go there. But look, voting is a personal choice. So I don't think telling you your vote is wrong is going to change your mind. It's just not, it's not smart. But what I do want to do is present the different arguments, and then you can make your mind up. I'm not going to present all of them here, but in general, in my videos, I want to present all the various arguments, and then you make your mind up and decide which argument you think makes the most sense. So Jesse Ventura starts here with the tweet. I keep getting asked who I'm voting for, if I'm going to endorse anyone, if I'm going to run. Let me be clear. I have zero confidence in Democrats and Republicans. I refuse to vote for the lesser of two evils because in the end, that's still choosing evil. So this is an argument we all hear endlessly. You don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils. I totally get it. So the way Jesse Ventura is looking at voting is that for him, it's an expression of what he believes in. So because he looks at voting that way, he can't bring himself to vote for somebody or vote for a party that he doesn't believe is fighting for him. Now, when it comes to the argument of voting against Trump, voting for Biden against Trump, voting in that sense, for people that don't agree with Joe Biden, don't think he's fighting for anybody or fighting for anything, the argument there is you would look at voting as a tool where you are separating yourself from the vote. So you look at the choices, looking at it logically, It's either going to be Biden or Trump as president. So using the tool that you have, the vote, you decide, well, I want to get Trump out. So to get Trump out, I got to go with Biden. And that doesn't mean that you believe in Biden. That doesn't mean that you like Biden. That doesn't mean that you agree with anything he's even saying. But if your objective is to get out Trump, then you use your tool of the vote to vote for Biden. So that is the argument for voting against Trump. The argument here is that Jesse believes that voting is basically expressing himself. So he can't bring himself to vote for Democrats or Republicans. Going on here, he tweets out, that doesn't mean I won't be voting. If you want to know my down ballot, it's the Green Party. I'm voting Green all the way down. And if you're looking to me for guidance, then do some research. Look into who is running Green in your state and vote them in. So again, as I was saying, Jesse Ventura here is trying to create some sort of energy towards Green Party candidates. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are people that have always been Green voters. If the Green Party wasn't there, they would just stay home. Like, this is one of the main issues with mainstream media and their attack on Green Party voters after 2016. Like, Rachel Maddow had a whole segment on this. Their assumption is that if those people that voted for the Green Party in those, let's say those swing states, if they didn't vote Green, then they assume, Rachel Maddow assumes that those voters would have voted for Hillary Clinton. That's not true. Many of those voters, if not most of them, would have just stayed home. So this idea that Green Party voters are automatically going to be Democratic voters if they don't vote Green is just, it's ridiculous. And people need to get away from that. Many people, including people that supported Bernie Sanders, were longtime non-voters, people that weren't engaged in the system, but then they saw Bernie Sanders actually fighting for them, so they got involved. We're talking about 40% of the country that doesn't normally vote. So if you engage those people with your campaign, you can't just expect those people to then move on to the next candidate if you go away, because they were there in the fight for you because of what you were fighting for. So again, understand that you can't just assume Green voters or third-party voters or independent voters are going to be voters for Democrats or Republicans. No, in many cases, they just wouldn't come out to vote. He goes on here, you want change? Vote. That's the only way to get the pencil pushers, the chicken hawks, the draft dodgers with so-called bone spurs out of Washington in 2020. Clearly a shot there at Donald Trump. Moving on. So he responds to a tweet here saying, I never thought I'd say this, but this is not the year to vote on principle. Anyone who votes Green this year is voting to re-elect Trump. No change, at least none for the better. He might trash the nation, but it's not positive change. Let's get him out, then work for change. And then Jesse Ventura responds to it saying, I'll entertain this because I'm sure mainstream media has already pumped this thought into people's heads, which of course they are. You should always vote ethically. No exceptions. If Democrips and Rebloodlikins aren't up to your standards, then why the hell are you voting them in? So again, this goes to what I was saying earlier. Jesse Ventura looks at voting not as a tool, but as an expression of himself. He can't, because he doesn't agree with those candidates or those parties, he's not going to vote for them. But then this person is looking at it a little more, I don't want to say strategically, because they're both looking at this in a strategic sense, but they're looking at this in a way where their focus is getting out Trump. Last tweet here. He says, you're just asking for more corruption by voting for bad candidates, especially if you willingly vote for bad choices. Why else would you vote for evil? Do you want the country to fail? Sounds that way. I'm assuming anyone who goes by this logic is a bot. Well, I will say if that was the case, then there are millions, the vast majority of voters are bots, because that's how most people vote. They are voting for the lesser of two evils because those are the choices presented to them, and the media doesn't question those choices. So because the media at large, mass media, doesn't question the reality that this two-party system of two parties representing special, wealthy corporate interests, they don't question how this system makes any sense or if it makes any sense. Voters don't question it. So when voters don't question their choices, then they're just going to fall in line. So look, I appreciate Jesse Ventura here for trying to push a different view. I think it's important that people whether it's celebrities or people in media, it's important that they do this. It's important that people like this exist. So at the same time, it's also important to separate these arguments from the individuals and see if they make sense to you personally. So some of my viewers, I'm sure, are going to vote for the Green Party. Some will vote for Biden to vote against Trump. Some might not vote at all. I will say, at the very least, you should go out and vote. You should go out and vote, and at the very least, vote down ballot. Because you have to, look, you have to be involved. It's important to be involved. Hopefully by the time it's November, it'll be safe to vote, or maybe there'll be mail-in ballots. But whatever it is, I think it's important that you do get involved. And look, when it comes to his logic here, it's hard to argue that you're just asking for more corruption by voting for bad candidates. I mean, the only thing I would say is that in some ways, there wasn't enough blame put on the left in 2016. Or, I mean, that isn't even true. What I'm trying to say here is that in order for things to actually change, like if you follow this logic here and assume that you are encouraging more bad candidates by voting for them, and in contrast, you are not encouraging that if you stay home or if you don't vote for those candidates, then the assumption would be that the candidates would get better next time. Well, the Democratic Party just went from Hillary Clinton to Joe Biden. So they got worse. And that was while the Democratic Party and the media were blaming Green Party voters and the left for not coming out to vote for Hillary Clinton. So even while they took the blame, and I should say the people that didn't vote for Hillary Clinton and then got offended that they were being blamed for Hillary's loss, why would you be offended? Own it. Like, if you want your non-vote to change things, then you should own the fact and say, yes, it's my fault that Hillary lost, so now maybe next time you should actually listen to our needs. Because if you don't own the loss, then what's the purpose of not voting for the candidate? You want to own the loss, you want the blame because you want them to change. But in 2016, they blamed the left and they didn't change. So this really gets back to the issue with the Democratic Party. And I think this is why Jesse Ventura's logic does make sense. Because the Democratic Party at large, I'm talking the leadership, the consultant class, the wealthy donors, they do not care who wins or loses in November. Now, I know that may sound shocking to a lot of people. Let me change that a little bit. I think they would prefer if Biden wins, but really their big fight was Bernie Sanders. And it's because if Bernie Sanders won the nomination, then who loses power? Those wealthy interests, the corporations, the consultants, current Democratic leadership. Tom Perez would be out. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer replaced. But because Joe Biden won, they were able to keep the power in the party. Those interests, those special interests still control the Democratic Party, and that's really ultimately what Democratic leadership cares about. So you aren't going to change their mind. If that's what they care about, you aren't going to simply change their mind by taking the blame for a loss. You have to actually rip power away from them by primarying Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, getting current Democratic leadership out, by having a nominee like Bernie Sanders that would actually completely transform the party into a party of working people again. So until that happens, and I think it's important to continue that project, but at the same time, sure, build up a third party. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I will say, though, the real investment here, I think, needs to be locally, because the other big barrier to a third party that is people aren't really clued in to that being a viable option, because, again, the media doesn't make it a viable option. So the only way to make a third party a viable option is to really start on the ground, start in local races, start in state races, slowly build the party up to a point where it now it now actually seems like the party is a real vessel, whether it's a Green Party or another independent party or third party, where the party actually seems like a real vessel for change. Because doing it strictly from the top down, just every 4 years, it's a Hail Mary. And these Hail Marys have not been working. So you need a change in strategy. There has to be a real investment in local races, in state races, to really be able to change the culture of the mindset of people when it comes to voting and what their legitimate choices are come November. One last thing here, as there was some speculation about this, as New York Post shares here, ex-WWE star Jesse Ventura shoots down rumors about running for president. So there were some rumors that he may be the Green Party candidate, or he may try and be at the top of the ticket, though they have somebody else right now, so I'm not sure how they would replace him. But anyways, it's not happening, at least according to Jesse Ventura, which, I mean, you got to believe the guy if he says it. But I do want to share one piece here. Despite his denials, Ventura admitted last September that he would use the element of surprise and enter the race when it came down to two candidates. Quote, I may be doing things behind the scenes right now, he admitted on the Fox 11 LA show, The Issue Is. Quote, I have that voice in the back of my head that says to me, if not me, then who? So, I don't know. We will see if Jesse Ventura makes a surprise appearance. But right now it sounds like he's not interested. And he's committing to voting for the Green Party. They have a candidate. So I don't know. But there it is. I think if you have the mindset of Jesse Ventura, I get it. I also get if you don't have that mindset. So there are various ways to look at voting in November, and I'm going to continue representing all these various views.